Hola! Baphomet is a very controversial symbol. Some people think of it as some evil deity or just another representation of the devil. To some people it represents balance. And to some people, it's just a cool image to put on a poster. But have you ever wondered who or what Baphomet really is? Or where they even came from? Well, make yourself comfortable, and let me tell you all about it. You probably have seen or heard of Baphomet. It's not exactly an obscure figure, and you can find it everywhere, like posters, books, movies, statues, even plushies that you can buy, or like this neat little necklace that I got a couple of years ago. As a symbol, Baphomet is sometimes associated with the occult, witchcraft, Satanism, etc. But did you know that the name Baphomet had already been around for about 750 years before it was even associated with our goat-headed friend? Before I get to that though, let's start with the depiction that pretty much everyone recognizes as Baphomet. So in 1854 and in 1856, French occultist, poet and writer Lévi published a 2-volume essay on ritual magic, which he called, and I'm sorry but I like to try to pronounce things in their language, so I'm sorry if this is too jarring, Dogme et Rituel de la Haute Magie, Dogme and Ritual of High Magic. The first volume was called Dogme, and it featured the Seal of Solomon as the frontispiece. The second volume, called Rituel, featured the Sabbatic goat as its frontispiece. Since then, the name Baphomet has been associated with this image, which is very cool. Fortunately, Lévi did describe what each element of his depiction meant, so yeah, he wrote, "The goat, which is represented in our frontispiece, bears upon his forehead the sign of the pentagram with one point in the ascendant, which is sufficient to distinguish him as a symbol of the light. He makes the sign of occultism with both hands, pointing upward to the white moon of Chesed and downward to the black moon of Geburah. This sign expresses the perfect harmony of mercy with justice. One of the arms is feminine and the other masculine, as in the androgyne of Conrad, whose attributes we have combined with those of our goat, since they are one and the same symbol. The torch of intelligence burning between the horns is the magical light of universal equilibrium. It is also the type of the soul exalted above matter, even while connecting with matter, as the flame connects with the torch. The hideous head of the animal expresses horror of sin, for which the material agent alone responsible must alone and forever bear the penalty, because the soul is impassible in its nature and can suffer only by materializing. The caduceus, which replaces the generative organ, represents eternal life. The scale-covered belly typifies water. The circle above it is the atmosphere. The feathers still higher up signify the volatile. Lastly, humanity is depicted by the two breasts and the androgyne arms of this sphinx of the occult sciences. Behold the shadows of infernal sanctuary dissipated. Behold the sphinx of medieval terrors divine and cast from his throne. Quomodo cecidisti, Lucifer." He got a bit carried away there at the end, but I hope you liked my dramatic reading. One thing that Lévi didn't mention in this particular description of the Baphomet is that the arms of the figure share one more similarity with the androgyne of German physician, philosopher and alchemist Heinrich Conrad. The words solve on the left arm and coagula on the right arm. These words represent the principle in alchemy, solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. According to this principle, a substance must first be broken down before it can be built up into something new. Solve refers to the breaking down of elements and coagula refers to their coming together. But this principle is also sometimes interpreted as the destruction of one's ego before the realization of the true self. Lévi also equated his image with the goat of Mendes, probably based on how it was described by Greek historian Herodotus, who said that the god of Mendes was depicted with the head, legs, and fleece of a goat. It's possible Herodotus was referring to one of the chief deities of Mendes, the ram deity Banebjetet, Ba of the lord of Jedet, along with his wife Hatmehit, foremost of the fishes, and their offspring Horus the child. They formed the Mendician Triad, and they were also the chief deities of Mendes. Some writers noted a link between the pagan god Pan and Lévi's Baphomet, such as Ernest Alfred Wallace Booth, Aleister Crowley, who we're gonna come back to in a bit because he's kind of important to this Baphomet thing, and Anton LaVey, who wrote, "Many pleasures revered before the advent of Christianity were condemned by the new religion. It required little changeover to transform the horns and cloven hoofs of Pan into a most convincing devil. Pan's attributes could neatly be changed into charged with punishment sins, and so the metamorphosis was complete. Lévi's Baphomet also has some resemblance to the early tarot card of Le Diable, or the Devil. It was drawn by Jean Dodal in the 18th century, and although he doesn't directly say that his drawing was inspired in any way by this image, the way that he describes it, it makes it obvious that he had some inspiration. So yeah, he wrote, "We return once more to that terrible number 15, symbolized in the tarot by a monster throned upon an altar, mitred and horned, having a woman's breasts and the generative organs of a man, a chimera, a malformed sphinx, a synthesis of monstrosities. Below this figure we read a frank and simple inscription, the devil. Yes, we confront here the phantom of all terrors, the dragon of all theogonies, the Ahriman of the Persians, the typhon of the Egyptians, the python of the Greeks, the old serpent of the Hebrews, the fantastic monster, the nightmare, the croquemitaine, the gargoyle, the great beast of the Middle Ages, and worse than all this, the Baphomet of the Templars, the bearded idol of the alchemists, the obscene deity of Mendes, the goat of the Sabbath. The frontispiece to this ritual reproduces the exact figure of the terrible Emperor of Night, with all his attributes and all his characters." So, I think this quote could be kind of misunderstood, because he says the devil and Baphomet are the same thing, basically. You know, he's saying that Baphomet is the same as the fantastic monster, which is the same as the devil, which is the same as the Ahriman of the Persians, you know. But I think it's kind of obvious that he's being dramatic in a sarcastic way, you know, because he's saying like, oh yes, the devil, this group's great evil, and this group's great evil, and just everybody's great evil, you know. He's playing up the description of the devil to be more dramatic. But I think it's pretty obvious that it's sarcastic. I just don't want people to think that Lévi is saying here that Baphomet and the devil, or Satan, are the same thing, when that's not what he was saying. He was just being sarcastic. But yeah, also in the quote you probably heard Baphomet of the Templars, and he does mean the Knights Templar. They are a big part of Baphomet's history, and we are gonna get to that, don't worry. So yeah, Lévi created the image of the Baphomet that we see pretty much everywhere today. But to him, Baphomet was not the devil, or a deity, or anything to be worshipped. And he didn't believe in Satan, at least not as a superior personality and power. He saw Satan as a personification of errors, perversities, weaknesses, etc. And Lévi saw his Baphomet only as a symbol, which to him represented light, mercy, justice, balance, and perfection, or the union of opposites to create divine harmony. So yeah, Lévi created the image of the Baphomet that we know and love today. But he didn't create a name, which predates Lévi. I mean, it predates Lévi's great-great-grandmother by a couple of centuries. Baphomet has a really long history, and it dates back a long time. The first ever recorded mention of the name is in a letter from the year 1098 by the French crusader Anselm of Ribeaumont, in a letter about the siege of Antioch, which took place during the First Crusade. This was 916 years ago. Anyway, in this letter he wrote, "As the next day dawned, they, the people of Antioch, called loudly upon Baphomet, and we prayed silently in our hearts to God. Then we attacked and forced all of them outside the city walls." Awesome. So we know where the name comes from now, like when it was first mentioned, but you might still have some questions like, who is this Baphomet? Who were these people praying to? And what does the name even mean? Well, there have been many proposed etymologies over the years. Some of them feel more likely than others. Some of them almost feel like a bit of a stretch, but I'm not a historian, so I wouldn't know. You know, maybe it makes perfect sense, but my brain just cannot grasp it. Anyway, starting with, in Pierre Klosowski's Le Baphomet, published in 1965, he wrote, "The three phonemes that constitute the denomination are also said to signify, in coded fashion, Basileus Philosophorum Metallurgicum, the sovereign of metallurgical philosophers, that is, of the alchemical laboratories that were supposedly established in various chapters of the temple. The androgynous nature of the figure apparently goes back to the Adam Kadmon of the Chaldeans, which one finds in the Zohar." Adam Kadmon is a figure in Kabbalah, a Jewish mystical tradition. He is also known as the primordial man, said to be the first emanation of God, as in the contraction of God's infinite light, not to be confused with Adam, the first human according to the Christian myth of creation. So, a bit of background for this one. Since the 18th century, there have been speculative theories which attempt to connect the Knights Templar with the origins of Freemasonry. So, for example, in the book, and this one's gonna be tough. Versuch über die Beschuldigungen, welche den Tempelherrenorden gemacht wurden, und über dessen Geheimnis. Or, Essay on the accusations made against the Templar Order and its secret. The German writer and Freemason Christoph Friedrich Nicolai said that the Templars were Gnostics and that Baphomet was formed from the Greek words Baphometus, which mean baptism of wisdom. He was apparently the first person to claim this, so, you know, there's that. Another etymology came from our boy Eliphas Levi. In one of his books he wrote, "The Baphomet of the Templars, whose name must be Kabbalistically spelled backwards, is composed of 3 abbreviations, Tem, Op, Ab. Templi, Omnium, Hominum Pacis Abbas. The Father of the Temple, Universal Peace of Men." You're probably noticing that the Knights Templar are starting to come up quite a bit, and I'm gonna come back to them, but first I want to finish with the etymology thing. So, in the Essene Odyssey, Hugh J. Schonfield, who is one of the people who worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls, wrote that the word Baphomet was created with the use of the Atbash substitution cipher, which substitutes the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet for the last, second for the second last, and so on and so on. So, supposedly, when the word Baphomet is translated to Hebrew, and then the Atbash cipher is applied to it, you end up with the word Sophia in Hebrew, which can be interpreted as the Greek word Sophia, which means wisdom. So, yeah, I don't know about this one, but again, I'm not a historian, so what do I know? And now for what seems to be the most accepted explanation, the name Baphomet is probably an Old French corruption of the name Mahomet, or as you've probably heard it, Mohammed. See, one of the chroniclers of the First Crusade, named Raymond of Aguilar, said that the troubadours would refer to Mohammed as Baphomet and mosques as Baphomaria. The troubadours were these medieval poets and musicians who composed and performed their own work. For example, in these 2 excerpts from Señors per los nostros pecats, or Lords because of our sins, by the troubadour Gabaudan, he wrote, "Emperor, hear this, and you, the King of France, and you, his cousin, and the English King, the Count of Poitou, come and assist the King of Spain, for never could anyone be more close at hand to serve God. With his assistance, you will vanquish all the dogs that Baphomet has deceived, and the renegades who have gone over to his side." He also wrote, "Gabaudan will be a prophet. What he has said will be done. Death to the dogs, and God will be honored and served where Baphomet used to be worshipped." And then there's this guy who only ever wrote one piece, and it's kind of spiteful, but I think it's kind of funny. It's called "Ai Dio, por que faccia tan gran maleza?" or "Ah, God, why have you done so much wrong?" It was written by Austur Thorlak after the defeat of the 7th Crusade in 1250. It goes like this. "I see Christendom as utterly destroyed. I do not think it ever suffered such an enormous loss. So it makes sense for people to stop believing in God, and for us to worship Baphomet, Tervagan, and his company where they are, given that God and Holy Mary want us to be unjustly conquered, and cause the disbelievers to continue to be honored." So I think this one is pretty funny. He's like, oh, well, I guess God and Mary hate us now, so we might as well worship Baphomet, Tervagan, and everyone else, Tervagan was the name given to a god that European Christians thought Muslims worshipped. This is false, of course. You can see why this theory became so prevalent. Historically, it makes the most sense. This was all happening during the First Crusades, so European Christians were trying to conquer the Holy Land, or Jerusalem, and the surrounding areas, and they would have been fighting a lot of Muslims. And so it makes sense that the name Mohammed would have come up a lot, and it would have been misinterpreted by a lot of people. Like I already mentioned, the Knights Templar come up quite a bit when you're researching Baphomet, and this is because the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping Baphomet. But, as we already discussed, Baphomet is probably an Old French corruption of the name Mohammed. And it is believed by a lot of people that the Templars' occupation of the Outremer may have resulted in the incorporation of some Islamic ideas into their beliefs, And so this was interpreted by the Inquisitors as heresy. And by the way, the Outre-mer were 4 Catholic countries that existed in the Levant from 1098 through 1291. And this area was proclaimed by the Latin Church in 1095 in order to reclaim the Holy Land after it was lost to the 7th century Muslim conquest. Outre-mer means beyond the sea in French. So in September of 1307, the French King Philip IV, or Philip the Fair as in attractive, not as in just, had many French Templars arrested, tortured into confessions, and charged with heresy, homosexual relations, sodomy, spitting on the cross, obscene kissing, idol worship, etc. You know, the things that they would accuse people of when they wanted the public to be against them. So most of these charges were pretty dubious, because these are also the same charges that were leveled against many of King Philip's enemies. For example, he actually kidnapped Pope Boniface VIII at some point, and he charged him with the same charges. So yeah, that same year the name Baphomet appeared in trial transcripts for the Inquisition of the Knights Templar. Another reason that a lot of people see these charges as being suspicious is that they seem to portray the Templars as a fairy tale of Muslims. See, medieval Christians thought that Muslims were idolatrous and that they worshipped Muhammad as a god. Of course, this has never been true. Muhammad is highly revered but not worshipped or seen as a god. And in fact, Muslims and Christians worship the same god, just in different ways. If you want to know more about the charges that were leveled against the Templars, well, just stay with me for a couple of seconds, because I'm gonna go into that right now. I don't know why I started that sentence like that. So, in the book The Templars, written in 1999 by British novelist Piers Paul Reed, he wrote, "Given that a large number of those arrested were not battle-hardened warriors, but plowmen, shepherds, millers, blacksmiths, carpenters, and stewards, the shock and disorientation, combined with the mere threat of torture, quickly led many to admit whatever the king's officers and the inquisitors suggested. By January 1308, 134 of the 138 Templars arrested in Paris had admitted some or all the charges brought against them, and it was the Grand Master himself, James of Molay, who within 10 days of his arrest led the way. What were the strange and unheard of things that they were accused of? The crimes horrible to contemplate, terrible to hear of. An abominable work, a detestable disgrace, a thing almost inhuman, indeed set apart from all humanity. According to the Capetian prosecutors, the Order of the Temple was given over to the worship and service of the devil. Each new recruit at his initiation was told that Jesus Christ was a false prophet who had been crucified not to redeem the sins of mankind, but as a punishment for his own. The postulant was ordered to deny Christ and to spit, trample, or urinate on an image of Christ on the cross, and then kiss the Templar, who received him on the mouth, the navel, the buttocks, the base of the spine, and sometimes on the penis. He was told that he could have carnal relations with other brothers, that this was not only licit, but they ought to do it, and submit to this mutually, and it was no sin for them to do this. To mark their rejection of Christ, Templar priests were said to have omitted the words of consecration during Mass. At secret ceremonies, they worshipped a demon called Baphomet, who appeared in the form of a cat or a skull, or a head with 3 faces. Cords which had touched this head were tied around the waist of the Templars in veneration of the idol. This was done everywhere and by the majority. Those that refused were either killed or imprisoned. So it is important to consider that these claims of an idol named Baphomet being worshipped by the Knights Templar are unique to the Inquisition of the Templars. And as Karen Rawls, the author of the Knights Templar Encyclopedia, says, no specific evidence of Baphomet appears in either the Templar Rule or in other medieval period Templar documents. And although it does seem that the idea of the Knights Templar having worshipped Baphomet is merely rooted in the fear and hatred of them suddenly being corrupted by Islam, or simply the fear of the spread of Islam, there are some people, such as Malcolm Barber, who has been described as the world's leading living expert on the Knights Templar, who believe that it is difficult to accept that an affair of such enormity rests upon total fabrication. Now, personally, it's not hard for me to believe that King Philip IV would have lied and made up a bunch of charges in order to get rid of the Knights Templar. It's important to remember that the Templars had a lot of wealth and power. And thanks to the Pope, they were exempt from all taxes, tolls, and tithes, as well as any feudal obligations in general. So they really only answered to the Pope. This amount of power definitely could have made the king feel threatened by the order. So it's not impossible that the king would have levied any charges against them that would make them be seen as less favorable. And so, after getting rid of Pope Boniface VIII and helping Pope Clement V take his place, the king used his influence on Clement V to disband the organization. So yeah, he definitely had the motive to lie about the order. And I hope this doesn't come off as me defending the Knights Templar, so don't get me wrong, these people were religious fanatics and zealous monsters. They thought that they had the right to do whatever they wanted because they were the hand of the Pope. And they thought that they had divine authority to destroy innocent people's lives just because they didn't pray to the same god, or even if they did pray to the same god, maybe they just didn't do it right. So no, I'm not defending them. I'm simply interpreting history in a way that makes the most sense to me, since it's impossible to know for certain what were the motivations of a king that finished rotting centuries ago. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the Order of the Knights Templar is a big part of Baphomet's history. I mean, it's a huge part of it, so I had to include it. And I hope it was interesting for you, because it was definitely very interesting for me. But yeah, moving on from that topic, there is a popular paraphrase that I sometimes associate with Baphomet. As above, so below. And you've probably heard it, or you've probably seen it on a depiction of Baphomet or any other occultist symbol. This phrase is based on one of many existing Latin translations of the Emerald Tablet. This tablet is a compact and cryptic Hermetic text, which was a highly regarded foundational text for many Islamic and European alchemists. The full verse goes like this. True it is, without falsehood, certain and most true. That which is above is like to that which is below, and that which is below is like to that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of one thing. And as all things were by contemplation of one, so all things arose from this one thing by a single act of adaptation. The father thereof is the sun, the mother the moon. The wind carried it in its womb, the earth is the nurse thereof. It is the father of all works of wonder throughout the whole world. The power thereof is perfect. If it be cast unto earth, it will separate the element of earth from that of fire, the subtle from the gross. With great sagacity, it doth ascend gently from earth to heaven. Again, it doth descend to earth, and uniteth in itself the force from things superior and things inferior. Thus, thou wilt possess the glory of the brightness of the whole world, and all the obscurity will fly far from thee. This thing is the strong fortitude of all strength, for it overcometh every subtle thing, and doth penetrate every solid substance. Thus was this world created. Hence will there be marvelous adaptations achieved, of which the manner is this. For this reason I am called Hermes Trismegistus, because I hold 3 parts of the wisdom of the whole world. That which I had to say about the operation of soul is completed. There are many interpretations as to what all of that means. For historians of philosophy and science, the verse is often understood as a reference to the supposed effects of celestial mechanics on terrestrial events, like the effects of the sun on the change of the seasons, or the moon on the tides, and some other more diverse astronomical effects. Another interpretation is that the verse refers to the doctrine of correspondences between the heavens and the earth, the macrocosm and the microcosm, the universe as a whole, and the world of man. A more elaborated and more complex version of the classic macrocosm-microcosm analogy is the Emanuel Swedenborg's doctrine of correspondence between different planes of existence, which was pioneered by Russian-American mystic and writer Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. In her 1877 book, Isis Unveiled, she wrote, "There is no prominent character in all the annals of sacred or profane history whose prototype we cannot find in the half-fictitious and half-real traditions of bygone religions and mythologies. As the star, glimmering at an immeasurable distance above our head, and the boundless immensity of the sky reflects itself on the smooth waters of a lake, so does the imagery of men of the antediluvian ages reflect itself in the periods we can embrace in a historical retrospect. As above, so it is below. That which has been will return again, as in heaven, so on earth." And she also wrote, "The spirit of a mineral, plant, or animal may begin to form here, and reach its final development million of ages hereafter, on other planets, known or unknown, visible or invisible to astronomers. For who is able to controvert the theory previously suggested, that the earth itself will, like the living creatures to which it has given birth, ultimately, and after passing through its own stage of death and dissolution, become an etherealized astral planet? As above, so below. Harmony is the great law of nature." So yeah, ultimately all of these interpretations share one thing in common. And it seems to be that no matter how massive or microscopic something is, everything in the universe is connected to a certain point. And, you know, I think that's a very nice thought. I think it's a very nice way to see life. Right, so there is another very famous depiction of Baphomet, and it is sometimes referred to as the Sigil of Baphomet. The image of the goat in the upside-down pentagram appeared for the first time in Stanislas de Guaita's 1897 book La Clef de la Magie Noire, The Key to Black Magic. It was accompanied with a drawing of a man in an upright pentagram. The upright pentagram includes the pentagrammaton at the vertices, which is an esoteric version of the Hebrew name of Jesus, Joshua, by adding the letter Shin in the middle of the tetragrammaton divine name, Yahweh. The names Adam and Eve can be seen surrounding the man in the image, and the 4 lower points of the pentagram represent the 4 elements of the material world, earth, water, air, and fire, while the topmost point represents the spirit ruling over matter. Therefore we can say that this symbol means spirit over matter, or holiness. The upside-down pentagram includes the Hebrew letters for the word Leviathan, the ancient serpent from the biblical Chaos Kampf, or battle against chaos, at the vertices. Here we can see the names Samael and Lilith surrounding the goat, which can be assumed to be Baphomet. In this case, with the pentagram inverted, matter is ruling over spirit, which can be interpreted as evil. A more modern depiction of this sigil was made by Anton Lévi, the founder of the Church of Satan. The word Leviathan remains written in Hebrew, and the colors have been inverted, but the names Samael and Lilith are no longer in the image. So yeah, as you can see, Baphomet appears in many forms. And in fact, he has been the inspiration of many very popular images of other figures. In the Rider-Waite Tarot, which is a very popular deck for tarot card reading, the card of the devil borrowed both from Lévi's Baphomet and also from the traditional Jean Dodal card. These cards were illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith based on the instruction of academic and mystic Arthur Edward Waite. In the drawing, the devil has bat's wings, bird's feet, and has a torch like in the Jean Dodal card, with the horned head and the inverted pentagram taking inspiration from Lévi's work. The devil's hand is making a sign which mocks the benediction gesture made by the card of the Hierophant. He's perched on a pillar to which are chained a man, Adam, and a woman, Eve, who are also featured in the card of the Lovers, to which this card is sort of an antithesis. In fact, we can compare them side to side and see that nearly everything is the exact opposite, as American writer Robert Michael Place described in his 2005 book, Tarot. He said, "Their angel of love and light has become a fallen angel of selfishness and darkness. Here their nudity represents unbridled passion instead of innocence, and as further evidence that they are ruled by their animal nature, the couple has grown tails and horns. Their tails are tied to the symbolism of their respective trees in Eden. The woman's tail bears fruit like the tree of knowledge, and the man's tail bears a flame like the tree of life. This is Adam and Eve in their fallen condition, chained to what is base. This card represents imprisonment, addiction, selfishness, and generally the bad and the ugly." Although Waite said that there is a sign of Mercury at the pit of the stomach of the devil, we can see that there isn't one. So it seems that Waite wanted the devil to be even more like Lévi's drawing of Baphomet, with the caduceus rising from his groin, but for whatever reason Smith left it out. So I don't know if you remember, but in the beginning of the video I made mention of a man named Aleister Crowley, and I said that I was gonna come back to him at some point. So this is that point. Back in the early 1900s, this guy, who was an English writer, occultist, and mythic, founded a spiritual philosophy and religious system, which he called Thelema. Central to this philosophy is the concept of discovering and following one's true will, which is represented by the intrinsic and divine purpose unique to each individual, and transcends mere personal desires and societal expectations. Baphomet became a very important figure within Thelema. In fact, they are featured in the Creed of the Gnostic Catholic Church, recited by the congregation in Book 15, the Gnostic Mass, a Eucharistic ceremony written by Aleister Crowley in 1913 while he was traveling in Moscow in Russia. This creed is divided into 8 clauses, followed by 3 repetitions of the Thelemic form of the pranava. equivalent to the sacred Amen of the Judeo-Christian tradition. The creed goes like this: I believe in one secret and ineffable Lord, and in one star in the company of stars, of whose fire we are created, and to which we shall return, and in one Father of life, mystery of mystery, in his name Chaos, the sole vice-regent of the sun upon earth, and in one air, the nourisher of all that breathes. And I believe in one earth, the mother of us all, and in one womb wherein all men are begotten, and wherein they shall rest. Mystery of mystery, in her name Babylon. And I believe in the serpent and the lion, mystery of mystery, in his name Baphomet. And I believe in one Gnostic and Catholic Church of light, life, love, and liberty, the word of whose law is Thelema. And I believe in the communion of saints. And, for as much as meat and drink are transmuted in us daily into spiritual substance, I believe in the miracle of the Mass. And I confess one baptism of wisdom, whereby we accomplish the miracle of incarnation. And I confess my life one, individual and eternal, that was, and is to come. August, August. So yeah, that was pretty cool. The first 4 clauses are attributed to the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, the Father being Chaos, the Mother being Babylon, the union of Father and Mother in the Son being Baphomet, and the Daughter, the Bride of the Son, being the Church. The 2 following clauses describe the essential products of the Mass from the perspective of the congregation, and the final 2 clauses are in the form of confession rather than belief and describe parallels between the occurrences of the Mass and the life of the individual. In his book Magic Liber Abba, Book 4, Crowley referred to Baphomet as the androgyne and the hieroglyph of arcane perfection, seen as that which reflects what occurs above so reflects below, or as above so below. So once more, we encounter a case in which Baphomet is represented not as an evil deity, but rather as a symbol of a positive aspect. In this case being the union of the Father Chaos and the Mother Babylon, Baphomet can be interpreted as a representation of love, fertility, or even life. So now we're going to move forward in time to a more recent event, which I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with. In 2014, the Satanic Temple, founded by Lucien Greaves and Malcolm Jerry, began an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign to create a satanic monument depicting Baphomet and 2 children with the objective to display this monument at the Oklahoma State Capitol. This was in response to the Ten Commandments monument, which was installed by Oklahoma State Representative Mike Ritza in 2012, a move which was very obviously a violation of the separation of church and state. The sculpture is 2.6 meters tall, or 8.5 feet, and weighs over 1,400 kilograms, or 3,000 pounds. It was created by artist Mark Porter in Florida using Eliphas Levi's depiction of Baphomet as inspiration, although there are some differences. For example, in this depiction there are 2 children next to Baphomet. About this, Greaves said, "We hope children will see this as a beautiful work of art. There is nothing to be afraid of. That's what the children symbolize." When he was asked if the children really have nothing to be afraid of from Satan, he responded, "I don't think any children approaching the monument without being primed by propaganda will find anything horrific about it. But we're about not indoctrinating children. For the most part, children are forced into religion. That's something we definitely don't care to do." Levi's depiction of Baphomet was androgynous and it possessed breasts. But that's not the case for this depiction of Baphomet. Greaves said that the Satanic Temple didn't want to get into a debate about gender, which might distract from what it believes are the most important messages of the Baphomet. Greaves said that the girl and the boy reflect the male-female dualism seen in Levi's depiction. This Baphomet, unlike Levi's design, sits on a throne and features an inverted pentagram at the top, which is widely recognized as a satanic symbol. So yeah, this interpretation of the Baphomet, although it's not the same as Levi's depiction, is fairly similar, and it adds some other meaning to it, right? With the children and the innocents looking at a beautiful work of art, and nothing more. I think that's a very nice message. On the 25th of July of 2015, the statue of Baphomet was unveiled at an event organized by the Detroit chapter of the Satanic Temple. The event was attended by around 700 people who had to sell their souls to Satan to be able to receive a ticket. This was a move made by the Satanic Temple to prevent superstitious people who would attend in order to undermine the event from acquiring a ticket. So they were trying to scare them, like, well, I mean, if they believe in God and Satan, they probably won't sell their souls to Satan just to be able to buy a ticket and, be annoying for a while at the event. So, if you're wondering about what happened with the Ten Commandments statue, It was removed on the grounds that Oklahoma state law prohibits the use of state property to further religions. And then after this happened, the offer to donate the Baphomet statue was withdrawn because, well, they kind of achieved what they were trying to do. They were trying to get the Ten Commandments statue off of state grounds because it's illegal, you know? It's not something you can do. You can protect people and their religions from being discriminated, but you can't pick and choose which religion you want to favor, you know? That's not good. So right now the statue of Baphomet is on exhibit at the Salem Art Gallery, and the Satanic Temple has been offering to other states where a Ten Commandments statue appears on publicly owned property. So, you know, they're still fighting the good fight to separate church and state as much as one can do. Like, church and state should never even touch each other. You should never let any religion influence any law. That is just a terrible idea. But yeah, right now it's on the Salem Art Gallery, and I've seen some pictures of the place. It looks amazing. I wish I could go. So if you can go, let me know how it goes, because I want to go. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'll be able to do that anytime soon, but you know, it's in the plans. As you already heard from me talking throughout this entire video, we can't really say that Baphomet has one objective meaning. It's kind of a difficult thing to define when it's a symbol that's been around for such a long time, and everybody who adopts it has been giving it a slightly different interpretation. Like, for example, a lot of Christians seem to believe that Baphomet is really just another representation of the devil, while a lot of people who use Baphomet as a symbol don't even believe in Satan, or God for that matter. And so its significance is going to vary person to person. If you see someone on the street who's wearing a shirt or a necklace that has Baphomet on it, and you ask them why they're wearing that, they are not all gonna give you the same answer. Some people will probably just answer, I think it looks cool, and that's it. Because for some people, Baphomet doesn't have a deeper meaning. It's just a cool looking image. For example, for me, when I look at these symbols, the inverted pentagram or Baphomet or anything like that, I only really think about how lucky I am that I was able to free myself from religion. When I was religious, I was kind of scared of everything, and so I would have never been able to interact with these symbols, much less use them on my person. But now I know that there is nothing to be afraid of because I managed to get away from that indoctrination, and I'm able to see them as only works of art, and nothing else. I guess in a way it could be said that to me Baphomet represents that feeling of looking back at a time where I was afraid simply because I was indoctrinated into being afraid. I was taught that I had to be afraid. And looking at myself now and feeling grateful to myself that I was able to get away from religion and superstition in general. And I don't really have anything against religious people or religion as a whole. I think it can be used for bad things, but I think to some people it brings solace and comfort. And I think that's fine. I think that's wonderful. If religion does that for you, all the power to you, you know? I mean, I don't want to take that away from anybody. As long as you don't use religion as an excuse to mistreat minorities or be a bigot in general, that's great. As long as it's not used to violate other people's bodily autonomy or dictate how other people live their lives, that's perfect. So yeah, that is what Baphomet represents for me. And I would like to hear what Baphomet represents for other people, so let me know. What does Baphomet represent for you? And with that, we reached the end of the video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed making it. So if you did enjoy it, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And yeah, have a great time. Adios.